A duke was having dinner, but seeing a poor mother with her daughter, he did something unbelievable. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The chandeliers sparkled above the crowd, the crystal drops catching the light like frozen raindrops, but Edward Blackwell, Duke of Ravensfield, barely noticed them. He sat alone at a polished table of dark wood, the finest in the grandest dining room in London, with a silver-domed roast before him, and 3 courses already served, barely touched. A waiter glided past and refilled his wineglass with a practiced hand. "Another portion of beef, Your Grace?" the man asked softly. Edward glanced at the platter. Thick slices, perfectly pink, glistening in their own juices. The smell should have made him hungry. It did not. "No, thank you," he said. "This is more than sufficient." The waiter bowed and retreated. Voices murmured all around, gentle laughter from the ladies, low talk from the men, the soft chime of silver on china. The room was warm, rich, secure, but Edward felt as if he were seated in a glass case, observed but untouched. He cut a small piece of the beef and raised it to his mouth. He chewed without tasting, swallowed without thinking. Another dinner, another evening filled because the world expected a duke to be seen. Ravensfield must be visible. Ravensfield must be respectable. Ravensfield must be everything except honest about his own weariness. He set down his fork, reached for his wine, and let his gaze wander. Beside his table, tall windows rose almost from floor to ceiling, their heavy draperies drawn back to display the night. London lay beyond the glass, dark and grey, the outlines of buildings softened by a thin snow that had fallen steadily since afternoon. Gas lamps flickered in the street, casting halos on the white ground. Carriages rattled past the front of the restaurant, leaving tracks that were quickly covered again. He looked out of habit, not expectation. Then his eyes sharpened. Near the window to his right on the other side of the glass, a small shape moved, then another. He blinked, leaned very slightly forward. A girl stood on the pavement, perhaps 6 or 7 years of age. She wore a thin, faded coat, buttoned to her throat, and a bonnet that had seen better days. Her nose was pink with cold, her cheeks chapped, but her eyes were wide and bright as she stared into the room. Her gloveless hands were pressed against the lower pane of the window. Beside her, a young woman stood close, trying to pull her back from the glass. The woman, her mother surely, was wrapped in a worn shawl, its edges damp with snow. Stray strands of brown hair clung to her temples. She was shivering. Even from his place at the table, Edward could see the tension in her shoulders as she tried to cover the child with her own body. He set his wineglass down with care. The child's gaze was fixed on a table not far from his own, where a large platter of roasted fowl had just been delivered. Steam rose from it. The girl watched the steam as if she could breathe it in. The woman bent and whispered something in the child's ear. The girl glanced up at her, then back at the food. She did not move. Edward's chest tightened with an old unwelcome sensation. Pity, no, not pity. Something sharper. He watched as the woman laid her hand gently on the girl's shoulder and tried again to pull her away. The girl resisted only a moment, then allowed herself to be turned. As they shifted, the woman lifted her face for the briefest instant, and the light from the restaurant fell upon her features. She was young, younger than he had expected. Her face was pale, the hollows beneath her eyes shadowed with tiredness. But there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself, in the straightness of her back despite the cold. She looked directly through the glass, not into the room, but toward some vague middle distance, as if she had taught herself not to see what she could not have. Then the child looked up and saw him. Her gaze slid past the platters and the crowded tables and fixed on his face. For a moment they regarded one another, a duke in perfect evening dress and a hungry girl in a wet, thin coat, separated by a few steps and a sheet of glass. Her lips moved as if she might say something. Then she ducked her head quickly, embarrassed, and pressed closer to the woman's side. Edward realized his hand had tightened around his napkin. He forced his fingers to uncurl. "Your Grace." He did not turn immediately. A gentleman at a neighboring table had addressed him, but Edward kept his eyes on the pair outside. "Your Grace," the gentleman repeated a bit louder, "I trust the roast is to your liking?" Edward glanced at the man, some viscount or other whose name he could not recall. "The roast is excellent," he said. "I commend the house." The man nodded, satisfied, and returned to his own conversation. Edward looked back to the window. The snow was falling harder now, dusting the girl's bonnet and the woman's shawl. They had not moved away, though the woman seemed to argue with herself. Her mouth formed silent words. She took a half step toward the street, then stopped, as if the child's weight at her side anchored her in place. A waiter approached Edward again. "Shall I clear your Grace's plate?" He looked down. His plate was almost full. "Yes," he said quietly. "You may." The waiter hesitated. "Would your Grace prefer another course?" "No, I am finished." He paused. "Is there a draught from this window? It seems colder than it was." The waiter glanced at the heavy draperies, at the glass. "I do not believe so, your Grace. The room is quite warm." "Is it?" Edward murmured. His gaze slipped back to the figures outside. The girl had begun to shiver visibly now, small tremors running through her frame. Something in him rebelled. Against what? He could not say. Against the room full of warmth and idle chatter. Against the way the waiters moved so smoothly, invisible and precise. Against his own untouched plate and the girl's empty hands. He pushed back his chair. The nearest waiter started. "Your Grace? Is something amiss?" "No," Edward said. "Everything is quite in order. I shall not be long." He took up his cane out of habit, though he did not need it, and made his way across the room. Heads turned. A duke did not usually rise between courses. "Is His Grace leaving?" someone whispered. "Already? How odd." He ignored the murmur of curiosity. The maître d', a man named Graham, thin and neat, with a smooth voice and watchful eyes, stepped forward as Edward approached. "Your Grace," Graham said, bowing. "Is there anything I may bring you? A different wine, perhaps? A special dish from the kitchens?" "No," Edward replied. His gaze flicked toward the window. "I am going outside." Graham's smile did not falter, but his eyes followed the Duke's glance. He saw the two figures on the pavement. His mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. "The weather is disagreeable this evening," he said. "If your Grace wishes to wait for your carriage, I shall have it brought round at once." "I do not require my carriage," Edward said. "I shall only be a moment." He did not explain further. Graham stepped aside, his bow a half-second slower than before. Edward crossed the last few steps to the door, feeling the shift in temperature even before it opened fully. The warm breath of the dining room fell away. A sharp wave of cold air entered in its place, biting at his cheeks and throat. He stepped out into the night. The snowflakes struck his face like tiny pins. The sounds of the street were muted under the blanket of white. Distant wheels, a horse's snort, the dull thud of footsteps. The door closed behind him with a soft thump. The woman and the child both turned at once. Their eyes widened. Edward stopped a short distance from them. Up close, the thinness of their clothing was painfully clear. The child's boots were scuffed and damp. The woman's dress, though clean, was patched at one sleeve. The shawl barely covered her shoulders. Her hands were red with cold. "Good evening," he said. The woman straightened. Her chin lifted slightly, as if bracing against an unseen blow. "Good evening, sir," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. The girl stared at him, first with curiosity, then with a flicker of wariness. She did not speak. "I am Edward Blackwell," he said. He had never introduced himself like that in his life. Usually others did it for him. "I am dining inside." The woman's eyes flicked to the large front windows, then back to his face. "I see, sir." He felt foolish all at once. What was he doing, standing in the snow announcing his name? Yet he could not return to his table and pretend he had seen nothing. "May I ask," he went on carefully, "how long you have been standing here?" She glanced down at the child. "Not long, sir." The girl shifted her weight from one foot to the other, sending up a small puff of powdery snow. Her hands were still bare. "You must be cold," Edward said. "We are accustomed to the weather," the woman said. "Are we not, Lily?" The girl came to attention at the sound of her name. "Yes, Mama," she murmured. Edward looked between them. The mother could not be more than 23. Her features were gentle, her eyes a clear grey. There was nothing coarse in her manner, only fatigue. "Forgive my intrusion," he said, "but I could not help noticing that you were looking in at the dining room." Colour rose faintly in her cheeks. My daughter is curious, sir. She has never seen such a place. I told her we could look from the outside. We had no intention of disturbing anyone. You have not disturbed me, he said. You have reminded me. She frowned slightly. Reminded you of what, sir? He hesitated. A memory flashed across his mind. A younger girl, pale and thin, standing at another window years before, shut out of a warm room. His sister. He pushed the memory aside gently. Of something I should not have forgotten, he said. Have you eaten this evening? The woman's shoulders stiffened. We have managed, sir. Managed is not the same as eaten, he replied. She looked away. We shall be home soon. Where is your home? Not far, she said quickly. It is of no importance. It is of importance to me, he answered. I have been sitting at a table with enough food for 3 men, and I find I have very little appetite. You are standing here in the snow with a child who cannot take her eyes off the platters. I should like you to come inside and dine with me. She froze. The girl's head turned sharply, her eyes wide again. Inside, she whispered. Edward inclined his head to her. Yes, inside, at my table, as my guests. The woman stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Sir, she began, I do not think you understand. I assure you I do. He softened his tone. You are a mother with a hungry child. I am a man with more than I require. There is nothing more to it. There is everything more to it, she said quietly. Men in fine coats do not bring women like me into places like that. He held her gaze. Men in fine coats ought to be ashamed, then. Her mouth parted slightly in surprise. You have done nothing wrong, he went on. You are not begging. You are not causing trouble. You were merely standing in the street, looking through a window. If any shame lies here, it lies with those of us who sit inside and pretend not to see. She swallowed. He saw her glance at the door, at the windows, at the warm glow within. Longing flickered across her face, quickly smothered. I cannot go in dressed like this, she said. They would turn us away. They will not, he answered. Not if you are with me. Sir, my name would mean nothing to them. But mine does, he replied. Sometimes a name is worth at least that much. The girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mama, she whispered, is he truly asking us to come in? Hush, Lily, the woman murmured, though her own voice trembled. Edward bent a little to address the child directly. What is your name? He asked. Lily, she said. Lily Harrow. A pretty name, he said. And your mother? The woman hesitated. Alice Harrow, she said at last. Alice, he repeated. Mrs. Harrow, will you do me the honor of joining me for dinner? I promise you no one will be allowed to speak against you while you are under my protection. She flinched slightly at the word protection, as if it carried a history. Why? She asked. Because I am tired of eating alone, he said simply. And because it troubles me that you and your daughter should stand here in the cold while there is warmth enough for 100 people behind this door. You do not even know us, she whispered. I know enough, he replied. I know that no child should look at food the way your daughter has tonight. Lily lowered her eyes, embarrassed. Alice Harrow closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if listening to some inner argument. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. If they protest, she said, if they speak against you for this, I shall leave at once. I will not be the cause of any trouble, sir. You must believe that. Madam, he said, straightening, if there is trouble, it will not be of your making. Come. He offered his arm. She hesitated only a heartbeat, then placed her gloved hand lightly on his sleeve. Lily took her other hand. Together they walked across the pavement toward the door. As they approached, the glass panes reflected their figures, his tall frame in dark evening clothes, her slight one in a thin dress and shawl, the child between them. Snow melted into small droplets on the glass, blurring the image. Edward felt their steps slow as they neared the entrance. He could almost hear the thump of his own heart, the shifting hum of conversation within, the faint clatter of dishes. He pushed the door open with his free hand. Warm air rushed out to meet them. The sounds of the dining room rose, then faltered. Conversations broke off. Forks paused halfway to mouths. A violinist in the corner let his bow rest lightly on the strings, the tune dying away. Every eye turned toward the door. Edward stepped inside first, drawing Alice and Lily gently after him. Snow clung to the hem of her dress, to the child's boots. A few flakes still sparkled in their hair. The maitre d' Graham was already moving toward them, his expression polite but puzzled. "Your Grace," he began, then stopped as he saw the two figures at Edward's side. His gaze flicked from their faces to their clothing, to the damp footprints they were leaving on the polished floor. Edward spoke before he could. "Mr. Graham," he said, his tone calm, "these ladies will be dining with me this evening. Kindly see that a place is laid at my table for Mrs. Harrow and her daughter." Silence deepened. Somewhere in the back of the room, someone whispered, "Good heavens." Graham's smile stiffened. "Your Grace," he said slowly, "perhaps we might speak aside for a moment." "There is no need," Edward replied. "I am quite clear on what I wish." Graham's eyes shifted to Alice and Lily again. The faintest crease appeared between his brows. When he spoke, his voice was lower, but not so low that those nearest could not hear. "I beg you to consider, Your Grace," he said. "This is an establishment of a certain standing. Our patrons expect a particular atmosphere. We must maintain a standard." "My name pays for that standard," Edward said evenly, "and I have just requested that these two be admitted as my guests." Graham's hands folded more tightly around his order book. "I mean no disrespect, Your Grace, but we do not usually receive persons of this description." Alice's fingers tightened on his sleeve. Lily pressed closer to her mother's side. Edward's jaw clenched. "What description is that, Mr. Graham?" Graham met his gaze with a placid look that did not reach his eyes. "Street people," he said softly. "The kind of folk who linger at windows. We cannot admit that sort of people through our doors, Your Grace." Edward did not raise his voice, but the air around them seemed to grow sharper. "That sort of people," he repeated quietly. "I see." Graham inclined his head a fraction. "You understand my meaning, Your Grace. Your generosity does you credit, of course, but the presence of—" His gaze dropped briefly to Alice's worn shawl, to Lily's damp boots. "Of persons who are not accustomed to such surroundings may distress our regular patrons." Lily's fingers dug into her mother's hand. Alice took a short breath, as if she had been struck. "Come, Your Grace," a woman's voice called from a nearby table. "You cannot be serious." He turned his head. At a corner table sat a lady he recognized vaguely, perhaps the wife of a baronet. Her gown was of pale silk, her hair arranged carefully, her expression one of affronted curiosity. Two other women and a gentleman sat with her, all watching closely. "You cannot mean to bring them in here," the lady continued, lowering her voice only slightly. "It is not appropriate." A few others murmured in agreement. The sound rippled through the room. Edward looked back at Alice and Lily. Alice's cheeks were burning now, her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. Lily stared straight ahead, her chin trembling. "Mrs. Harrow," Edward said in a low tone, "do not be distressed. You have done nothing wrong." She swallowed hard. "We should go," she whispered. "Please, sir, it is better this way." He met Graham's eyes again. "Mr. Graham, you spoke of standards. Allow me to remind you of another. When a guest of this house extends hospitality, it is not for the staff to refuse." "Your Grace," Graham said, keeping his voice smooth, "if we make an exception tonight, others will expect the same. We must think of the comfort of all." "The comfort of all," Edward said, "or the prejudice of some?" A hush fell. The words hung in the air. The baronet's wife set down her fork with a little click. "Surely, Your Grace," she said, "a gentleman of your standing understands that one must draw a line somewhere. If the street is allowed to walk in, what is to become of places like this?" Edward turned fully to her, but his tone remained polite. "Madam, if the comfort of your dinner relies upon a child remaining hungry in the snow, perhaps it is not as delicate as you suppose." Her lips parted in outrage. "How dare you suggest—" "Madam," he said, bowing his head slightly, "I dare because I have eyes, that is all." "Your Grace," Graham cut in quickly, sensing the growing heat, "I beg you, allow me to fetch the proprietor. It is a matter he must decide." "By all means," Edward said. "Fetch him." Graham hesitated, then nodded and slipped away. The room remained silent. People pretended to look at their plates, but their attention did not stray far from the entrance. The violinist shifted uneasily, bow still resting on the strings, uncertain whether he should resume playing. Alice leaned closer to Edward. "Please," she said under her breath, I cannot bear all these eyes. We should leave. If you wish to leave, he replied softly, we shall. But not because someone has made you feel you do not belong in a place where I have invited you. I do not belong, she whispered. Look at me. He did. He saw the worn shawl, the patched sleeve, the snow melting on her hem. He also saw the way she held her head, the way she tried to shield her daughter with her own body. I see a woman, he said. A mother. That is enough. Lily looked up at him, startled. Her eyes were wet, but she did not speak. A door at the far end of the room opened. Graham returned, followed by a man in his middle years, broad in the shoulders, with careful side whiskers, and a waistcoat that strained slightly at the buttons. This was Mr. Elkins, the proprietor. His usual expression of genial welcome was tempered now by unease. Your Grace, he said, hurrying forward, bowing deeply. What an honor to see you this evening. I trust everything is to your satisfaction. That depends, Edward said quietly. Am I to understand that you intend to refuse my guests? Elkins's eyes flicked from Edward to Alice and Lily. His smile faltered. He recovered it quickly, but there was a tightness to it now. There has been a misunderstanding, I am sure, he said. Mr. Graham is only thinking of the establishment's reputation. We have worked hard to cultivate a certain exclusivity. And you fear that Mrs. Harrow and her daughter will damage it, Edward said. Is that the concern? Elkins spread his hands. You know how it is, Your Grace. Our patrons are of the best families. They come here to enjoy their meals without discomfort. Discomfort in the form of a woman and a child, Edward asked. Fully clothed, quiet, respectful. They possess nothing that could offend the eye except their poverty, and that does not spread by contact. A frown creased Elkin's forehead. I do not mean to insult anyone's circumstances, he said, though the words sounded rehearsed. But if we admit such persons once, where does it end? Tomorrow there might be others at the door. We cannot become a soup kitchen. Lily's small hand tightened again. Alice's shoulders drew in. You are not asked to become anything of the sort, Edward replied. You are asked to serve 3 persons instead of 1. At full price, I might add. That is not the point, Elkins said. If the other patrons are offended, they may choose not to return. My staff depend upon the custom of these people. I must think of all, not only of one. And I tell you, Edward said, that if you deny entrance to my guests tonight, you will lose more than my custom. I shall see to it that every gentleman of my acquaintance knows how you refused entrance to a child at my side. Elkin's eyes widened. Color rose in his face. Your Grace, there is no need for threats. I make no threat, Edward said. I state a fact. Graham shifted uncomfortably behind his employer. The room held its breath. Elkins hesitated, torn between his fear of losing a duke's favor and his dread of the murmuring tables around them. He glanced toward the baronet's wife, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, as though urging him to stand firm. Edward saw the gesture. His expression did not change, but his voice grew colder. Choose, Mr. Elkins, he said. Will you deny me the right to seat my own guests at my own table? Elkins swallowed. No, he said slowly. No, of course not. We are honored by your Grace's presence and that of your companions. The words tasted sour, but he forced them out. Mr. Graham, see that the table is laid accordingly. A murmur rose, louder now, discontented. The baronet's wife whispered sharply to her husband. I shall not return if this is to be the way, she said, audibly enough for others to hear. Mark my words. Madam, Edward said without looking at her, you must do as you think best. Elkins forced a laugh that convinced no one. There, you see, he said weakly. All resolved. We shall make certain your guests are comfortable, Your Grace. Graham stepped forward, his face stiff. If you will allow me to escort the ladies to your table, he said. Edward turned back to Alice and Lily. Will you walk with me? He asked gently. Alice's face was pale, but she nodded. If you insist, sir, she said, though I fear we are causing you a great deal of trouble. You are causing me none, he replied. Others are doing a very good job of that on their own. He offered his arm again. She took it, not with the easy grace of a lady accustomed to such things, but with hesitant care. Lily walked on her other side, her eyes darting about the room, taking in the shimmering glass, the gleaming silver, the flowers on the tables. They crossed the dining room under a forest of glances. Some were curious, some disapproving, a few openly hostile. Edward kept his gaze straight ahead, his back straight as if nothing were amiss. At his own table, Graham had already signaled for 2 more place settings. A waiter hurried to lay them, cheeks flushed, hands quick. The napkins were folded precisely, the additional chairs positioned. "If you will be seated," Graham said, his tone professionally smooth, his eyes carefully avoiding Alice's face. Edward gestured to the chair nearest him. "Mrs. Harrow," he said. "Please." She hesitated, then sat down, clutching her shawl close. The chair seemed to swallow her slight figure. Lily climbed into the smaller chair beside her, her feet dangling above the floor. Edward resumed his own seat. "Thank you, Mr. Graham," he said. "We shall require plates for the first course at once." "Of course, Your Grace," Graham said. He inclined his head and retreated, his lips pressed tight. For a few moments, no one at the surrounding tables spoke. Then slowly, the low hum of conversation resumed, though the tone had changed. There was a new edge to it, a sharpness, as if each word had been dipped in vinegar. Alice shifted uneasily, her eyes fixed firmly on her hands, folded in her lap. "This is wrong," she murmured. "We should not be here." "You should be exactly where you are," Edward answered. "At a table, not in the snow." Lily glanced at the plates already before him. "Is that beef?" she asked, then reddened. "I am sorry, Mama says I must not ask questions at other people's tables." Edward smiled faintly. "You may ask any question you wish at mine," he said. "Yes, it is beef. Do you like it?" "I do not know," she said. "I have never tasted beef like that." "Then we must remedy that immediately," he said. A waiter approached with cautious steps, carrying 2 clean plates. He placed one before Alice and one before Lily, then looked uncertainly at Edward. "Serve them as you would serve me," Edward said. "The same portions, the same dishes." The waiter blinked. "Yes, Your Grace." He carefully lifted the carving knife and sliced generous pieces of the roast onto their plates, added potatoes, carrots, thick gravy. The aroma rose rich and warm. Lily stared at the food as if afraid it might disappear. "You may begin," Edward said gently. She looked at her mother. "Mama?" Alice's throat worked. "Say thank you to His Grace," she whispered. "Thank you, Your Grace," Lily said quickly. "You are welcome," he replied. She took up her fork and knife with clumsy care, cut a small piece, and put it in her mouth. Her eyes widened. She chewed slowly, as if she wanted to make the taste last as long as possible. Alice lifted her own fork, but her hand shook slightly. She set it down again. "I cannot eat," she said under her breath. "You can," Edward said softly. "No one here has any more right to their supper than you do to yours." "That is not true," she whispered. "They have money, they have names, they belong." "And you have hunger," he replied. "That is reason enough." A group at a nearby table watched openly as Lily took another bite, then another, faster now, the first edge of hunger beginning to ease. One of the men muttered something under his breath. His companion laughed. Edward turned his head slowly. "Is there something amusing?" he asked. The man coughed. "Nothing, Your Grace," he said. "Only a private remark. No offense meant." "Then I advise you to keep it private," Edward said. And silent, the man flushed and looked away. Alice lowered her voice. "You should not speak so," she murmured. "They will resent you." "I am not interested in their approval," Edward said. "I am interested in yours." She glanced at him, startled, then dropped her gaze again. "I am no one, sir," she said. "You are someone to your daughter," he answered. "That alone makes you worth more than all the petty opinions in this room." A waiter reappeared with a basket of bread. He set it down between them. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the warm rolls. "Take one," Edward said. She looked to her mother yet again. "May I, Mamma?" Alice nodded, swallowing. "Slowly," she said. "Do not make yourself ill." Lily chose a small roll, held it in both hands, and broke it open. Steam curled into the air. She smiled. A quick, brilliant smile that softened everything about her face. Edward felt something in his chest ease. They ate in relative silence for a time. The clatter and murmur of the room gradually settled into a new rhythm around them. A few diners rose and left sooner than they might have otherwise, throwing backward glances as they went. Others stayed, curiosity overcoming their discomfort. Between bites, Edward asked gentle questions. "How old are you, Lily?" he asked. "7, sir," she said. "Nearly 8. My birthday is in March." "And what do you like best in the world?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Books," she said. "When Mama has time, she reads to me." "Does she?" he said. "What does she read?" "Stories," Lily said, "about girls who go to grand houses and find treasure, or lost brothers or hidden gardens." Alice blushed faintly. "I borrow books when I can," she said. "Sometimes from neighbors. Sometimes the vicar has old ones he no longer needs. I do not read them as well as I ought." "You read them well enough for your daughter to love them," Edward said. "That is proof of talent." Alice toyed with a piece of potato. "You are kind, sir," she said. "Kinder than is safe, perhaps." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Only that there is a world out there that will not thank you for tonight." He glanced around. "I do not seek its thanks." The meal continued. They were served a lighter second course, then a sweet pudding that made Lily's eyes shine anew. She ate every spoonful eagerly, though she tried to maintain the manners her mother had clearly taught her. Alice ate more slowly, as if each bite was a decision. By the time the plates were cleared, the room had begun to thin. Some guests had finished and moved on to other entertainments. Others lingered over coffee, still watching. Edward signaled for the bill. Graham approached with the account, which Edward settled without glancing at the sum. "Your Grace," Graham said quietly, leaning nearer, "if I may suggest, there is a quieter way for such benefactions. The kitchens can prepare parcels. The ladies could have been served at the back door without causing comment." "Do you often feed your patrons at the back door?" Edward asked. Graham drew back a fraction. "That is not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant," Edward said. "You wish to keep them out of sight." Graham's mouth stiffened. "I wish to avoid discomfort for all concerned." "Then consider this your discomfort," Edward said. "I trust it will be instructive." Graham bowed again, lips pressed together. "As you wish, Your Grace." Edward turned to Alice and Lily. "Have you had enough?" he asked gently. "There is more if you wish it." "Oh, yes," Lily whispered. "I could eat forever, but Mama says one must know when to stop." Alice managed a faint smile. "We are very grateful," she said. "We have had more than we expected when we left our room this evening, more than we have had in a long time." He hesitated. "May I see you home?" Her eyes widened. "No," she said quickly. "That is not necessary. You have already done too much." "Too much?" he repeated. "I have offered you a meal, nothing more. If people see you with us in the street," she said, "they will talk even more. They will say things. They will invent them if they cannot find any true ones. You do not need that. What I need," he said slowly, "is to be able to sleep tonight. I do not think I shall if I imagine you walking back alone in this weather." She hesitated, torn. "It is not far," she said. "All the same," he replied. "I insist." Lily looked hopeful. "Please, Mama," she said. "It will be dark." Alice exhaled in resignation. "Very well," she said quietly. "If you wish, sir." He rose. They followed suit, Lily clutching her mother's hand, Alice holding the shawl tightly around her. As Edward put on his coat, he turned briefly to speak with an acquaintance who had approached him with a question about a meeting the following week. The conversation took a few moments more than he would have liked. He kept his replies short, eyes drifting back to where Alice and Lily stood near the entrance. Graham appeared at their side. "If you would come this way," he murmured to Alice with a bland smile. "There is a small matter to be attended to before you depart." Alice looked confused. "A matter? Nothing of consequence," Graham said. "Just a small detail about the arrangements. This way, if you please." She glanced toward Edward, who still seemed occupied. Not wishing to cause delay, she nodded and allowed Graham to lead her and Lily away from the main door, down a side corridor. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Just this way, miss," Graham said. "Mind your step." They reached a plain door at the end of the corridor. Cold air seeped through the cracks around it. "This is not the way we came in," Alice said, frowning. "The front is crowded," Graham replied smoothly. "This is quicker. The gentlemen prefer not to have their exits delayed." He pushed the door open. A gust of cold struck them. The alley behind the restaurant lay in shadow, lit only by a distant street lamp. Snow lay deeper here, undisturbed. Alice drew back. "Sir, surely—" "This way, madam," Graham said briskly, already half turned away. "I'm afraid the front is not convenient for your departure." Lily shivered. Alice stepped out reluctantly, the snow biting through her thin shoes. The door swung shut behind them with a firm click. Alice stared at the blank wood for a moment, understanding settling like another layer of cold upon her shoulders. "They did not want us to be seen leaving," she said softly. Lily's teeth chattered. "Mama, I am cold." Alice turned at once, wrapping her arms around the child, drawing her close. "We shall go home now," she murmured. "Quickly, hold on to me." She took a step forward. Her foot slipped on a patch of ice hidden beneath the snow. She lurched, tried to catch herself, but her balance was already lost. She fell hard to her knees, pulling Lily with her. The child gave a soft cry of alarm. Pain shot through Alice's legs. The cold soaked instantly through the thin fabric of her dress. She clutched Lily tightly, shielding her from the ground as best she could. "Are you hurt, Mama?" Lily whispered, voice trembling. "Hush," Alice said, though her own voice shook. "I am all right. I am all right." Inside the restaurant, Edward finally freed himself from the conversation and turned toward the entrance, expecting to find Alice and Lily where he had left them. The space was empty. He frowned and looked around. "Mr. Graham," he called. Graham appeared almost immediately, his expression composed. "Your Grace." "Where are Mrs. Harrow and her daughter?" Edward asked. "They were just here." "Oh," Graham said lightly. "They have already departed, Your Grace, through the side door. They did not wish to trouble you further." Edward's eyes narrowed. "The side door?" "Yes, Your Grace, it is closer to the street they mentioned, much more convenient." Edward stared at him for one long, silent moment. Then he turned on his heel and strode across the dining room. "Your Grace?" Graham called after him. "Is there something you require?" He did not answer. He pushed through the same side corridor Graham had led them down, his steps quick, his coat unbuttoned, the cold seeping in before he even reached the door. He flung it open. The alley stretched before him, shadowed and white, and there, only a few paces away, he saw Alice on her knees in the snow. Her dress darkened where it met the icy ground, her arms wrapped desperately around Lily, as if to shield her from everything the world might throw at them. "Alice," Edward said sharply, stepping into the alley. "Are you hurt?" She looked up, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with melting snow. "No," she gasped. "No, I am quite all right. I slipped, that is all." Lily clung to her, silent now, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. Edward went to them at once. He held out his hand. "Allow me." "No, Alice began, but her voice shook and she broke off. He did not wait for permission. He slid an arm under her elbow and helped her to her feet with careful strength, mindful of the child in her arms. She staggered once, then found her balance. He kept a steadying hand at her back. "You are freezing," he said. "You should not have been sent out this way." She glanced back at the closed door. "They did not wish to trouble you," she said quietly. "I understand." "I do not," he replied. "Not in the least." Lily lifted her head. Snowflakes clung to her lashes. "We are all right, sir," she whispered. Edward's jaw tightened. He shrugged off his own cloak and swung it around Alice and Lily together in one smooth movement. "You will both catch your deaths if you remain in those clothes," he said. "Keep this on." "I cannot take your cloak," Alice protested, trying to hand it back. "You will be cold." "I am not made of glass," he said, "and I am not the one who has been kneeling in the snow." She hesitated, then clutched the cloak more tightly around Lily. It swallowed them both, warm and heavy. He turned to the door, his eyes hard. "Wait here a moment," he said. "Do not move." "Sir, please, let it be," Alice said quickly. "You have done enough. We only wish to go home." "And you shall," he said, "but not until I have spoken to someone." Before she could stop him, he strode back to the door, wrenched it open, and disappeared inside. Lily shivered. "Are we in trouble, Mama?" she whispered. Alice pulled her closer. "No, my love," she murmured. "You have done nothing wrong. Whatever happens, you must remember that." Inside, the warmth hit Edward like a wave, but it did nothing to ease his anger. He found Graham in the corridor, straightening a stack of menus with unnecessary precision. "Mr. Graham," Edward said, each word clipped. "Did you send my guests out through the back door?" Graham started. "Your Grace, Yes or no?" Edward said. Graham swallowed. I believed it would be more appropriate, less attention. The front? Appropriate, Edward repeated. You sent a lady and a child into an unlit alley alone in the snow without asking my leave. Is that what you call appropriate? Graham lifted his hands in a small, placating gesture. Your Grace. The other guests were watching. Some were visibly displeased. I thought it best to avoid further disturbance. So you chose to insult mine instead, Edward said. You chose to dispose of them like refuse. Graham flinched. That was never my intention. But it was the effect, Edward said, and the effect is what concerns me. Elkins appeared at the end of the corridor, drawn by the raised voices. Your Grace, he said, forcing a smile. Is there some difficulty? Yes, Edward replied. There is. Your employee decided that the proper way to dismiss my guests was to thrust them into a back alley like intruders. Mrs. Harrow has just fallen. Elkins' face paled. Fallen? My word. Is she hurt? She says not, Edward said. But that is beside the point. You will instruct your staff that any person I bring through your doors is to be shown the same courtesy as myself. If you cannot manage that, you will not be honored with my patronage again. Elkins spread his hands in distress. Your Grace, I assure you we meant no harm. Mr. Graham acted in haste. He was thinking of the comfort of our regular clients and forgot that your regular clients are not the only people in the world, Edward said. Elkins shot Graham a furious glance. You should have been more considerate, he snapped. Apologize at once. Graham's jaw worked. Of course, he said stiffly. I shall, if your Grace desires. You will apologize, yes, Edward said, but you will do so to Mrs. Harrow, not to me, and you will do it another time. At present I am taking her home. Elkins bowed, flustered. As you wish, your Grace. Please extend to her our regrets. Edward gave a short nod and left without another word. Back in the alley, Alice was still standing where he had left her, arms wrapped tightly around Lily, the cloak pulled high around their faces. It is settled, he said. You owe them nothing. Come, I shall see you home. Sir, she said uncertainly, you are under no obligation. I am under one, he cut in. To myself. I will not pretend I have not seen what I have seen tonight. Pray do not ask me to. She met his gaze for a moment, then looked away. Very well, she said softly. If you insist. I do, he replied. He offered his arm again. This time she took it without protest. Lily walked on her other side, wrapped in the cloak, her face barely visible. They left the alley and stepped into the street. The snow had eased a little, but the air was still sharp and damp. The lamps cast small islands of light. Their footsteps crunched in the thin layer of white. Which way? Edward asked. This way, sir, Alice said, toward Bishop's Lane. You walk all that distance at night? He asked. When there is no choice, she replied. We did not intend to stay long at the window. It was only... She broke off. Only longer than you meant, he said, because the food was difficult to look away from. She said nothing. Tell me, he went on, what kind of work do you do? I sew, sir, she said. Mending, small pieces, sometimes shirts if there is steady custom. Other days, I take in laundry, anything honest that is offered. And the child's father? He asked gently. She stiffened. He is gone, she said. I am sorry, Edward said at once. I did not mean to wound you. You did not, she said. It is simply not a story I can tell in the street, or perhaps anywhere. He let the subject rest. And Lily? He asked after a moment. Does she attend school? Alice gave a soft, almost apologetic laugh. School is for those who can pay fees, she said. We cannot. I teach her at home, when there is time. What do you teach her? He asked. Letters, she said, numbers, a little writing, a few verses, and whatever scraps of stories I can remember from... Before, he repeated. She shook her head. It does not matter, sir. That life is gone. They walked in silence for a few minutes. The houses grew narrower, the street less even. Lamps were farther apart. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Lily spoke suddenly in a small voice. Sir? Yes, Lily? Edward said. Will you be in trouble? She asked. In trouble, he repeated, surprised. Why do you ask? Because of us, she said. The people in the restaurant were angry. Mama said you might be too one day because of us. Alice gasped softly. "Lily, hush." Edward looked down at the child. "I am not angry with you," he said. "Do you know what a duke is, Lily?" She nodded solemnly. "A very important person." "Some people say so," he said. "But I tell you this. A duke may bear frowns and whispers without serious harm. A little girl cannot bear hunger so easily. If anyone is to be in trouble, better it be the duke." Lily considered this with grave seriousness. "You are not like the gentleman in the stories," she said after a moment. "Is that so?" he asked, a corner of his mouth lifting. "What are the gentlemen in the stories like?" "They are very grand," she said. "They ride horses and go to balls and marry princesses." "Do they?" he said. "Perhaps the stories need more variety." Lily smiled faintly and pressed closer to her mother. At last, Alice stopped in front of a narrow brick house with a chipped step and a small crooked brass number by the door. "This is where we lodge," she said. "We have a room at the top." Edward examined the house. It leaned slightly, as if tired. Light glowed behind only one or two curtains. He opened the door for them. The entrance smelled faintly of damp and coal dust. A narrow staircase rose into darkness. "Allow me," he said. He reached for a small lamp hanging on a hook and lit it with a match from his pocket. "You need not climb all those stairs," Alice protested. "You have already walked so far." "I am not yet an invalid," he replied. "Lead the way." They climbed the creaking staircase, past doors with keyholes plugged by cloth, past voices murmuring behind thin walls. On the top floor, Alice stopped before a door with peeling paint. She reached into her sleeve, drew out a small key and unlocked it. "I am almost ashamed to let you see," she said quietly. "Do not be," he answered. She pushed the door open. The room beyond was small but clean. A narrow bed stood against the wall, covered with a worn quilt. A single chair, a tiny table with a candle and a basket of mending completed the furnishings. In the corner, an empty hearth gave off no warmth. Edward stepped inside and felt at once the difference in the air. It was as cold inside as out. "You have no fire," he said. "We save coal when we can," she said. "It is not always possible to afford it." He looked at Lily. The child had begun to sway with tiredness now that the excitement was fading. "Put her to bed," he said gently. Alice nodded. She led Lily to the bed, helped her remove her boots, which were damp through, and eased her under the quilt. "Thank you for the cloak," Alice said, unfurling it carefully and handing it back to him. "It has been a great help." He took it, reluctant to remove it from their shoulders. "You will be warm enough?" he asked. She glanced at the thin quilt, then smiled with effort. "We have managed so far," she said. "We shall manage again." "That is not an answer," he said. "It is the only one I have," she replied. He stood in the small space, cloak over his arm, feeling the limits of what he could offer without overstepping. He did not wish to insult her by pressing coins into her hand as one might do with a beggar. She was not that. "If you allow it," he said, "I should like to send a few things in the next day or two. Coal, perhaps. Some food. Nothing grand. Only what might make the winter a little less harsh." Color rose in her cheeks. "You have done enough," she said. "More than enough. We cannot accept—" "I ask you not to refuse me," he interrupted. "Think of it as a debt that I owe you." She blinked. "A debt?" "Yes," he said, "for the reminder you gave me tonight. I had forgotten that all this excess can blind a man. You opened my eyes again. That is worth a few sacks of coal, surely." She looked at him, truly looked this time, as if trying to see what lay behind the fine coat and polished manner. "I do not like charity," she said. "Nor do I," he said. "So let us not name it that. Let us call it a correction. The world is unbalanced. A little weight shifted here or there may do it good." Her mouth twitched slightly. "You speak very strangely for a duke, sir." "I am told as much," he replied. Lily's eyes had drifted shut. Her breathing slowed. "You should go," Alice said softly. "It is late. You must have business in the morning. Men like you always do." "I do," he said. "But tonight, this was my business." He moved toward the door, then turned back. "Mrs. Harrow?" "Yes, sir?" He hesitated. "If you find yourself in need of anything, if Lily falls ill, if work is scarce, send a note to Ravensfield House. Address it to me personally. Do you understand?" She gave a small, incredulous laugh. "I cannot present myself at a great house, sir. They would not even open the door to me. I did not say present yourself, he replied. I said send a note. There is a post office on the corner of your street. You know how to write. You told me so. Her eyes widened slightly. How did you... You mentioned reading stories, he said. It was not difficult to guess. She looked down. I do know how to write, she admitted. Once there was a time when such things mattered. They still do, he said. Remember what I have said. I speak in earnest. She nodded slowly. Very well, she murmured. If there is no other choice, I will write. But I hope that day does not come. He inclined his head. Good night, Mrs. Harrow. Good night, Lily, the child murmured in her sleep. Alice watched as he stepped into the corridor and closed the door quietly behind him. The stair creaked under his weight as he descended. At the bottom, the landlady, a stout woman with a kind but sharp eye, was wiping her hands on her apron. You've brought my lodger home then, she said. She's a good girl, that one. Works herself to the bone. I can see that, Edward said. Too proud, though, the woman went on. Won't ask for help even when she should. She squinted at him. She said you were a gentleman, I suppose you are. I hope so, he replied. Well, if you are, the woman said, you'll remember that that little one upstairs has a cough that keeps her awake at night, and winter's not done yet. I shall remember, he said quietly. He left the house with the landlady's words in his ears and the image of Alice's thin room in his mind. The next morning, in his own library, he spoke with his steward. I want coal delivered to this address, he said, sliding a card across the desk. Quietly, twice a week until further notice, and a parcel of food too. Bread, meat, milk when possible. Enough for 2 persons. No more than that. They must not be overwhelmed. The steward raised an eyebrow slightly. Very good, Your Grace. Shall we send a note explaining the sender? No, Edward said. No note. Or rather, if one must go, let it be very simple. From a friend. As you wish, Your Grace. And see that the bills are sent to my personal account, Edward added. Do not place them among the household expenses. The steward inclined his head. Of course. Over the next days, the deliveries began. At first, Alice assumed there had been a mistake. Mrs. Harrow, the landlady called up the stairs one morning. There's a man here with a sack of coal for you. Alice appeared at the top of the staircase, startled. There must be some confusion, she said. I did not order any. The man says it's paid for, the landlady replied. And there's more coming in the afternoon food, he says. Alice descended slowly, hands twisting in her apron. The delivery man tipped his cap. Coal for Mrs. Harrow, he said. Instructions are to leave it here. Whose instructions? She asked. He shrugged. Comes from Ravensfield House, miss. That's all I know. Her heart gave a little jolt. There has been a mistake, she said. I cannot accept. The account's settled, the man said. If you don't take it, I suppose I must leave it in the street. The landlady clicked her tongue. Don't you dare let him do such a thing, she told Alice. You take it. Whoever sent it, God bless him. Alice hesitated, then nodded. Very well, she said softly. Thank you. Later that day, when a package arrived with bread, cheese, a small joint of meat and a bottle of milk, she held the note that came with it, from a friend. No name, no flourish. Only those 3 words in a firm, neat hand she recognized from the brief note she had seen at the restaurant. She pressed her lips together and folded the note carefully into a small box. A week passed, then another. Edward came once to the lodging house, under cover of delivering a book he claimed to have promised Lily. Lily greeted him with delight. Sir, she cried, flinging her arms around his waist, before she remembered herself and stepped back, cheeks pink. Forgive me. Mamma says I must not forget my manners. On this occasion, Edward said, smiling, I am quite content to be tackled. Alice watched, a strange expression in her eyes. Gratitude, certainly, but something else too. Caution. You should not come so often, she said quietly when Lily ran to fetch the book they had been reading. People may notice. Let them, Edward said. Do you feel better with coal on the hearth? Yes, she admitted. Lily sleeps more deeply. She coughs less. Then it is worth whatever people may say, he replied. She looked at him sadly. You think so now, she said. You may not always. Soon, the city began to talk. At clubs and tea tables, the tale of the Duke who had brought a poor woman and her child into a fashionable restaurant was repeated with increasing color. He sat them right at his own table, a gentleman told his friends at White's. The child ate like a starved kitten. And the mother? Someone asked. Quiet as a mouse, they say, but young, not old enough to be so worn. Do you suppose she is his? Another man raised his eyebrows, letting the unspoken word hang. It appears not, the first said. He left alone. But who can say what will happen now that he has taken an interest? In a warm drawing room across town, Lady Beatrice Ashford listened as a friend recounted the story again. He has been to her lodging, the friend said in a conspiratorial whisper. Alone, Beatrice, imagine. Lady Beatrice sat very straight on the sofa, her dark eyes sharp. She had once pictured herself as the Duchess of Ravensfield. The title had slipped through her fingers, but the expectation of proximity remained. A lady was there when he arrived, the friend went on. She said the house is in a poor district, the sort of place one prefers not to think about. And the woman? Beatrice asked. What is her name? I believe someone said Harrow, the friend replied. Alice Harrow. Beatrice's fingers tightened around her teacup. A faint ringing began in her ears. Are you certain? She asked. That is what I heard, the friend said lightly. Does it signify? Beatrice's mind went back 10 years to a governess with steady grey eyes and a soft voice reading to the children by the fire, to hushed conversations with her mother about a regrettable incident, to a dismissal carried out quickly and quietly. It might, Beatrice said, it might signify a great deal. That afternoon Beatrice sent for her maid. Fetch my carriage, she said, and have one of the footmen learn the direction of this Mrs. Harrow's lodging. I shall pay a call. On a poor woman, my lady? The maid asked, startled. On a matter of business, Beatrice replied coolly. Do as you are told. The next day, when Alice was bent over her sewing, there came a firm knock at her door. Mrs. Harrow, the landlady called. You have a visitor. A visitor, Alice repeated. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door. A tall lady stood in the corridor, wrapped in a fine cloak, a small bonnet tied precisely beneath her chin. Her posture was perfect, her expression composed. She looked as out of place in the narrow hallway as a swan in a puddle. Mrs. Harrow, she asked. Yes, Alice said slowly. I am Lady Beatrice Ashford, the woman said. May I come in? Alice's breath caught. For a heartbeat, everything around her seemed to blur. Lady Beatrice, she said. Yes, Beatrice replied. I see you remember me. Alice stepped aside automatically. Of course, my lady, she said. Please, though there is not much room. Beatrice entered with careful movements, avoiding the low lintel. She glanced around the small space, the bed, the hearth, the sewing basket, with a faint curl to her lip. I see, she said. Life has not treated you kindly. Alice folded her hands to keep them from shaking. What brings you here, my lady? She asked. Beatrice turned to her, eyes cool. I thought it best to speak to you privately, she said, before things go any further. I do not understand, Alice said. Do not pretend, Beatrice said sharply. I hear that you have attracted the notice of the Duke of Ravensfield, that he brought you into a reputable establishment, that he visits you here, and that he sends you gifts. Alice's face flooded with color. Your information is exaggerated, she said. He has been kind, nothing more. Kindness from a man in his position is not a small thing, Beatrice said. It is dangerous. For you and for him. I never sought his attention, Alice said, voice low. We met by chance. He saw Lily at the window, that is all. Lily, Beatrice repeated. The child. She moved closer to the bed, where Lily sat, her sewing in her lap. The girl had been silent, observing everything with wide eyes. Come here, child, Beatrice said. Lily looked at her mother. Alice nodded reluctantly. Lily slid off the bed and stood before Beatrice. How old are you? Beatrice asked. 7, my lady, Lily said softly. Beatrice studied her face, the line of her small nose, the shape of her mouth. Something flickered in her expression, quickly hidden. You have your mother's eyes, Beatrice said. That may or may not be a blessing. She turned back to Alice. You know why you left my father's house, she said. Alice's fingers tightened together. I know what was said, she replied. And what do you say? Beatrice asked. That it was not true, Alice said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was never true. I told you so then. No one listened. Beatrice's gaze hardened. You were found alone with my brother, she said, after dark. in a part of the house where you had no business being. I went there to retrieve a book for the children, Alice replied quickly. He followed me. I asked him to leave. He would not. When I raised my voice, your mother arrived, that is all. My brother claimed differently, Beatrice said. He said you enticed him. He lied, Alice said, the word coming out in a rush. He lied to protect himself. I begged you to believe me. You turned away. Beatrice's mouth thinned. I was 19, she said. I believed my family, as any daughter would. The scandal might have ruined us all if it had not been contained. It ruined me instead, Alice said, her eyes bright with pain. I lost my position, my references, everything. You chose to leave, Beatrice said. I was asked to go, Alice replied, with no letter to explain, no chance to defend myself. You know that, my lady. Beatrice took a breath. What is done, she said. We cannot change the past, but we can avoid making it worse. Alice looked at her warily. What do you want from me? I want you to understand your place, Beatrice said. You live in a world that is very different from his. You know what people said about you once. If the Duke continues to see you, they will say it again, louder. They will not be kind. They will not be just. Alice's shoulders sagged slightly. I am aware, she said. Then you must end it, Beatrice said. Send him away, refuse his visits, decline his gifts. Do whatever you must to convince him that this acquaintance cannot continue. And if I do not? Alice asked quietly. Beatrice's eyes sharpened. Then I will feel obliged to share what I know, she said, for his protection. What you know, Alice said, choking a little on the words, is a lie. The world believed it once, Beatrice replied. It will believe it again. I will tell people that you are not what you seem, that you were dismissed from a respectable house under a stain, that you have no right to stand beside a man like the Duke of Ravensfield. Lily's hand crept into her mother's skirt. Mama, she whispered. Alice put an arm around her. Do not listen, my love, she said. Beatrice's gaze flicked to the child, then back. You would risk your daughter's future for the sake of... What? She asked. A few visits from a man who will tire of the novelty and move on. When he does, you will be left with nothing but a ruined name. I already have nothing, Alice said, except her. Then keep that at least, Beatrice said. Send him away. If you do, I will remain silent. No one need hear the old stories again. Alice closed her eyes. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Lily's uneven breathing. When Alice spoke, her voice was flat. You ask too much, my lady, she said, but I have nothing with which to bargain. I am not bargaining, Beatrice said. I am warning you, this is your only chance to shield yourself and your child from more pain. With that, she drew on her gloves and turned toward the door. Good day, Mrs. Harrow, she said. Think carefully. Your next action will determine everything. The door shut behind her. Lily looked up at her mother, eyes full of confusion. Mamma, why did the lady speak so harshly? She asked. What did she mean about you and her brother? Alice sank onto the chair, her legs weak. Nothing you need to worry about, she said, though her voice was rough. It is only old unkindness. Will the Duke stop visiting? Lily asked, her lower lip trembling. Is it my fault if he does because we stood at the window? Alice gathered her into her arms, holding her tightly. No, she whispered. No, my love. It is not your fault. None of this is your fault. That evening, when Edward came again, the atmosphere in the little room had changed. He noticed it at once. The fire burned. The food on the table was simple but sufficient, yet the air felt strained. Alice, he said, entering. Lily. Lily gave him a small, hesitant smile. Good evening, sir, she said. Alice rose, smoothing her skirt. Good evening, Your Grace, she said. The title sat stiffly on her tongue. He frowned. We have done without Your Grace for some time now, he said. Why revive it? It is proper, she said, not meeting his eyes. I should not have forgotten myself before. You did not forget yourself, he replied. You were candid. That is all. She busied herself with folding some mending, her movements precise. We cannot accept anything further from you, she said abruptly. No more coal, no more food, no more books. He stared. Why? It is not right, she said. We have spoken of this. People talk. They are already talking. I will not have your name dragged through the mud on our account. My name can withstand some mud, he said. I am not so delicate. You do not understand, she said, her voice tightening. There are things about my past you do not know, things that would be used against you if you continue to come here. Then tell me, he said. Let me know what I am facing. She shook her head. I cannot. It is too late. The story has already been told, and once a story is told, people choose the ending they prefer. He watched her. Someone has spoken to you, he said. Who was it? No one, she said too quickly. Only my own thoughts. Do not lie to me, he said gently. You are not practiced at it. Her eyes flashed briefly, then dulled. It makes no difference, she said. You must stop coming here, please, for Lily's sake, for your own. And what of your sake? He asked. She pressed her lips together. I shall manage, she said. I always have. Lily clutched the new book he had brought, holding it to her chest like a shield. Will you never come again? She whispered. He looked down at her, something twisting inside him. I do not know, he said honestly. That depends on your mother. Alice flinched. He turned back to her. If I agree to stay away, he said quietly, will that ease your mind? She nodded once, her throat working. Yes, she whispered. And will it make you happy? He asked. Her eyes filled suddenly. She looked away. My happiness is not important, she said. It is to me, he replied. She said nothing. At last he inclined his head. Very well, he said. If it is your wish, I shall respect it. But know this, Mrs. Harrow. I do not give up easily, and I do not believe everything I am told about people I care for. Her breath hitched at the word care. He left a moment later, the room feeling smaller now that he was gone. That night, in his study at Ravensfield House, Edward sat at his desk. A stack of old letters and accounts spread before him. A single lamp burned low, throwing his face into thoughtful shadow. He had sent a discreet inquiry earlier that day to a man who knew the old scandals of London's houses, as well as he knew their kitchen inventories. The reply lay open on the desk. Governess dismissed some 10 years ago, he read aloud softly. Name, Alice Harrow. House, Lord Ashford's. Reason given, impropriety with the younger son. He leaned back, jaw clenched. Alice Harrow, he repeated. Impropriety with Ashford's son. He turned over another paper. A name was underlined in a neat hand. Reverend Henry Collins, he murmured, parish minister at Ashford's country seat at the time. Witness to the dismissal, familiar with the circumstances. He stared at the name. If there is any truth to be found in this, he said quietly to the empty room, he must know it. His fingers tightened around the paper as he realized that the quiet country clergyman whose name he had just read might hold the key to Alice Harrow's past. The village lay several hours from London, but Edward made the journey in one. His carriage rolled through bare fields and low hedges, the winter sky hanging close overhead. At last, the horses slowed before a small stone church and an adjoining parsonage with smoke curling faintly from its chimney. A boy ran to take the horses' heads. Edward stepped down, lifted his collar against the cold, and walked up the flagged path to the parsonage door. He knocked firmly. After a moment, the door opened. A man in his late 50s stood there, spectacles perched low on his nose, a shawl thrown over his shoulders. His hair was mostly white, his eyes clear and thoughtful. Good afternoon, he said. May I help you, sir? Reverend Henry Collins? Edward asked. Yes, the man replied. And you are Edward Blackwell, he said. Duke of Ravensfield. The Reverend blinked, then stepped back at once. Your Grace. Forgive me, I did not expect. Please come in. The wind is sharp. Edward entered the small parlour, warmed by a coal fire. A worn armchair stood by the hearth, books stacked on a side table. It smelled faintly of ink and tea. Will you sit? Collins asked. May I offer you something hot? Tea, perhaps? Thank you, but no, Edward said, though he took the offered chair. I will not take much of your time. I have come on a matter that may be painful to recall. Collins sank into the opposite chair, studying him with quiet curiosity. Painful matters are not uncommon in my line of work, Your Grace, he said. How may I assist you? I believe you served as parish minister near Ashford Hall some 10 years ago, Edward said. For Lord Ashford. Collins's brows drew together. I did, yes. I left that post 8 years past. Why? There was an incident, Edward said. A scandal involving a governess in Lord Ashford's household. Her name was Alice Harrow. The Reverend's hands stilled. I remember, he said slowly. I remember very well. I would hear the truth of what happened, Edward said, from someone who was there, someone who I am told may have seen more than others wished to know. May I ask, Collins murmured, why this matter concerns you now, after so long? Because Alice Harrow is not a name in a report to me, Edward said quietly. She is a living woman in London. She has a child, and she has been warned that if our acquaintance continues, that old story will be revived to destroy her and to wound me. Collins sighed, a long, weary sound. Then it has come to that, he said. I feared it might, one day. What do you know? Edward asked. I know that the wrong person paid the price, Collins said, as so often happens. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I was called to Ashford Hall late one evening, he began. Lady Ashford sent for me. She was agitated. She said there had been a situation with the governess and the younger son, Mr. Frederick. She wanted advice on how best to manage it without causing gossip. Go on, Edward said. When I arrived, Collins continued, I found Miss Harrow in tears in the small schoolroom, and Lady Ashford and Miss Beatrice in the adjoining sitting room. Mr. Frederick was nowhere to be seen. I spoke first with Lady Ashford. She told me that Miss Harrow had enticed her son, that they had been found together in a secluded passage. She feared for the young man's reputation. She wished to dismiss the governess at once, quietly, and send her away without a reference. Without hearing the girl, Edward said, I requested that I be allowed to speak with her, Collins replied. Reluctantly, Lady Ashford agreed. Miss Harrow told me a different story. She said she had gone to fetch a book the children had left behind. Mr. Frederick followed her and cornered her in that passage. He attempted to touch her. She resisted. When she tried to call out, Lady Ashford appeared. That is what she told me. And what did you believe? Edward asked. I had known Miss Harrow for more than a year, Collins said. She was devoted to the children, modest, serious. There had never been the slightest hint of impropriety. Mr. Frederick, on the other hand, was known for recklessness. He had been corrected more than once for inappropriate conduct with housemaids. I found it difficult to accept that she had suddenly become the aggressor. So you believed her, Edward said. Yes, Collins answered, but belief and power are not the same. Lady Ashford refused to consider her son at fault. She insisted that the appearance of wrongdoing was enough. She would not risk her family's name. She told me that the only solution was to dismiss Miss Harrow and to make it clear to the servants that she was to blame. I argued, Your Grace, not as forcefully as I wish I had all these years later, but I did argue. And Beatrice? Edward asked. Where was she in this? Present, Collins said, silent at first, but when I pressed Lady Ashford to consider her son's pattern of behavior, Miss Beatrice spoke up. She said that even if her brother was overly friendly, it was the governess's duty to keep her distance. That in such matters, the lower-born woman must bear responsibility. Those were her words. Edward's eyes darkened. Of course they were. Miss Harrow knelt, Collins went on softly. She begged Lady Ashford to believe her. She said she had nowhere to go, no family who could help her, and that a dismissal under suspicion would destroy any chance of future employment. Lady Ashford would not be moved. Miss Beatrice would not meet her eyes. What did you do? Edward asked. What I could, Collins said with a sigh. I told Lady Ashford that as her clergyman, I could not stand by and see an innocent woman ruined without at least some provision. We agreed, if one can call it agreement, that Miss Harrow would be given a small sum to leave quietly and that nothing would be said in public. But below stairs, the servants were told she had behaved improperly. It spread from there. And you? Edward asked. Did you speak in her defense? I did when I could, Collins said, to those who would listen. But Miss Harrow left early the next morning. I saw her only once more, very briefly at the edge of the village. She thanked me for believing her, though she said it had made no difference. Then she walked away, carrying a small trunk, and I never saw her again. He fell silent. Edward sat very still. So the story that is told now, he said at last, that she seduced a foolish young man is a lie. Yes, Collins said simply, a convenient lie. It allowed a noble family to remain comfortable. The price was one young woman's future. Did Miss Beatrice know this? Edward asked, though he already suspected the answer. She knew enough, Collins said. She heard Miss Harrow's account. She had seen her brother's behavior toward servants before. She chose, as many choose, to support the stronger voice. That is all. Edward rose slowly. Reverend Collins, he said, if this matter were to be raised again, if someone were to repeat the old story about Miss Harrow, would you be willing to speak as you have spoken now? Collins looked up at him. To whom? To anyone who needs to hear it, Edward replied. Society, if necessary, or at least to those whose opinion carries weight. The Reverend considered. I am an old man, Your Grace, he said. I have few ambitions left, but I have often wished I had done more for that girl. If there is an opportunity to set the record straight, even a little, I will take it. Edward inclined his head. Thank you, he said. You may have a chance to do so sooner than you think. He took his leave not long after, his mind already several steps ahead. On the drive back to London, he watched the winter fields roll past and thought of Alice, alone in her small room, trying to hold back a storm she had not created. By the time he reached the city, a grey dusk had settled. He did not go home. Instead, he directed the coachman to Bishop's Lane. The lodging-house door opened at his knock. The landlady's face appeared, flushed and worried. Oh, Your Grace, she said. I was wondering if you might come. His heart lurched. What has happened? It's the little one, she said. Lily, she's taken a fever, came on fast. Mrs. Harrow is beside herself. He didn't wait for more. Take me up, he said. On the top floor, he found Alice sitting on the edge of the bed, Lily's small form curled under the quilt. The child's cheeks were bright with fever, her eyes half closed, her breathing quick and shallow. Alice, he said, moving toward them. What is her condition? Has a doctor seen her? Alice looked up, eyes red, hair loose around her face. The doctor came this morning, she said. He said it is a chest fever. He left some medicine, but she... Her voice faltered. She is so hot. I cannot cool her. Lily stirred at the sound of his voice. Sir? She whispered faintly. He sat on the other side of the bed and took her hand gently. It was burning. I am here, Lily, he said. You must be brave. It hurts, she breathed. To breathe. I know, he said softly. But you are strong. You will fight it. He looked at Alice. This room is too cold, he said. Too small. She needs more air, better care, someone watching her at all hours. We do what we can, Alice said, her voice raw. I do not leave her. I know, he said. But there is another option. She stiffened. What option? My house, he said. Ravensfield House. There is a warm room, a good doctor, nurses who know how to manage such fevers. She will have the best chance there. Alice shook her head at once. No, she said, I cannot take her into your house. It would cause more talk, more trouble. Lady Beatrice has already... I am past caring about Lady Beatrice, he interrupted. This is not about gossip. It is about a child who may die if we do not act. The word die hung between them. Alice closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. Do not say that, she whispered. I must, he said, because it is true, and I will not stand in this room and watch you lose her when I could have helped. She looked down at Lily, then back at him. She might recover here, she said weakly. She might, he agreed, and she might not. At my house her chances improve. Surely that is worth a few wagging tongues. And what of you? Alice asked desperately. The world will say you have taken a poor woman and her child into your home. They will assume things. I do not live my life by the world's assumptions, he said, and I will not leave a child's health to their mercy. He leaned forward. Alice, listen to me. If it were your neighbor's child, if you had the means to move her to a place where she could be better cared for, would you hesitate? No, she whispered. Then do not hesitate now, he said. We are wasting time. Tears spilled over at last. I am so afraid, she said. If I lose her, I have nothing, nothing. And if you lose her knowing you refused help because you feared other people's opinions, he asked gently, would you forgive yourself? She shook her head, covering her face with one hand. No, she said hoarsely. Never. He reached across Lily to touch her shoulder lightly. Then let me help, he said. For her sake, if not for yours. Lily made a small sound, caught between a cough and a sob. "Mama," she murmured, "I am so tired." Alice dropped her hand and looked at Edward. A long, silent moment passed. "Very well," she said at last, voice almost inaudible. "If you are certain, if the doctor agrees, we will go." "I am certain," he said. "I will send for my physician at once. The carriage is below. Can you wrap her warmly?" Alice nodded, already moving, wiping her eyes quickly. She dressed Lily in her warmest clothes, layer upon layer, and wrapped her in blankets. Edward took the child carefully into his arms. "Easy," he said softly. "I have you." Lily's head lolled against his shoulder, her breath uneven. They went down the narrow stairs, Alice following, carrying a small bundle of belongings. The landlady watched from the doorway, wringing her hands. "You see, she's well cared for," the woman said. "She's a good little soul." "I will," Edward promised. At Ravensfield House, the doors swung open before them. Some of the servants stared openly at the sight of their master, carrying a small wrapped bundle, and a pale woman stepping hesitantly over the threshold. Others dropped their eyes, masking their surprise. "Mrs. Turner," Edward called to his housekeeper, who hurried forward at once. "Prepare the blue guest room on the second floor, extra blankets, hot water. This child is ill and will be staying here with her mother until she recovers." "Yes, Your Grace," Mrs. Turner said, though her eyes were wide. "And send for Dr. Havers immediately," he added. "Tell him it is urgent." Within minutes, the house was moving. Footmen carried hot bricks to warm the bed. Maids fetched basins and cloths. A fire roared in the grate of the chosen room. Edward laid Lily gently on the bed. Alice hovered nearby, plainly overwhelmed. "This room is larger than our whole house," she whispered. "It is only a room," he replied. "What matters is that she is here." The doctor arrived soon after, a brisk man with grey hair and sharp eyes. He examined Lily thoroughly, listened to her chest, felt her pulse, and questioned Alice about the onset of the fever. "Well?" Edward asked when the doctor straightened. "A severe chest infection," Dr. Havers said. "She is young and slight, which makes it more dangerous. But the warmth here, fresh linen, regular doses of the medicine. I have seen children recover from worse." "And if she had remained in that cold attic?" Edward asked quietly. The doctor hesitated. "Her chances would have been poorer," he admitted. "Much poorer." Alice's hand flew to her mouth. "We will watch her," the doctor said firmly. "You must keep her warm, encourage sips of water when she wakes, and let her rest. I will return in the morning." When he had gone, the house settled into a new rhythm. Alice refused to leave Lily's side, but Mrs. Turner coaxed her to eat a little soup and drink tea. Edward checked on them several times, always finding Alice at the bedside, wiping Lily's brow, whispering soothing words. On the second evening, as he stepped into the room, Lily opened her eyes properly for the first time. "Sir," she murmured. He moved closer. "How do you feel?" "Less on fire," she said weakly. "Is this your house?" "Yes," he said. "Do you approve?" She looked around at the high ceiling, the thick curtains, the polished furniture. "It is very grand," she said. "Do you live here alone?" "Far too alone," he said. "At present." "You should have more stories," she said. "Houses like this need stories inside them." He smiled. "Perhaps that will change." When he looked up, he saw Alice watching him, something soft and bewildered in her eyes. As the days passed, Lily's fever subsided. Color returned slowly to her cheeks. She began to sit up in bed, then to stand a little, leaning on the bedpost. The house adjusted to the presence of two new residents. A maid brought trays to the blue room. Mrs. Turner caught Lily giggling with one of the younger footmen, who showed her how to fold napkins into shapes. Whispers circulated below stairs, of course, but they were tempered by the sight of the Duke himself carrying the child once, when she begged to see the garden from a window on the lower floor. "It is like a story," one maid said to another. "Imagine a duke caring for a seamstress's child." "Best be careful how loudly you say such things," the other replied. "Some might not like it." Those some soon made themselves known. In the drawing rooms of London, the tale took on fresh colour. Lady Beatrice heard that Alice and Lily were not merely receiving charity from Ravensfield, but living under his roof. "This is intolerable," she said to a friend. "He shows no sense of propriety." "You must speak to him again," the friend urged, "before his reputation is damaged beyond repair." I intend to do more than speak, Beatrice said. She did not go to Ravensfield House alone. She went armed, with gossip, insinuation, and the certainty that she was protecting her class. When Edward was informed that Lady Beatrice Ashford had called and requested an audience, he considered sending a polite excuse. Then he remembered Reverend Collins's words and changed his mind. "Show her into the small sitting room," he said. "I will see her." He found Beatrice standing near the window, gloved hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. She turned as he entered, her expression perfectly arranged. "Beatrice," he said, "you honor my house." "I wish it were under different circumstances," she replied. "Edward, we must speak plainly." "By all means," he said, taking a seat. "Plain speech is refreshing." She remained standing, as if the chair might contaminate her. "I hear," she said, "that you have taken into your home a certain woman and her child, a woman of compromised reputation." He met her gaze steadily. "You refer to Mrs. Harrow and her daughter?" "Yes," she said. "People are talking. They remember what happened at my father's house. They are asking why you align yourself with someone of her history." "Are they?" he said. "And what do you tell them?" "I say nothing for now," she answered. "But I fear I will not be able to remain silent if this continues. I cannot stand by and see you ruined by an attachment to someone unworthy of you." "Unworthy," he repeated softly. "That is a strong word." "It is the right word," she said. "She was dismissed for impropriety. You know this." "I know that she was accused of impropriety," he said. "By your family. I also know something more." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said calmly, "that I have spoken with Reverend Henry Collins." Color drained from her face. "You went to him?" "I did," he said. "He remembers those events quite clearly. He remembers Miss Harrow's account. He remembers your brother's history, and he remembers your silence." Beatrice's composure wavered, then snapped back into place. "He is mistaken," she said stiffly. "It was years ago. Memories blur. He would naturally wish to side with the unfortunate." "You think so?" Edward asked. "Let us test that." He reached for a bell and rang it once. A moment later, the door opened. Reverend Collins stepped into the room, hat in hand. Beatrice's eyes widened. You brought him here?" "Yes," Edward said. "I thought it best that we all speak together rather than in fragments." Collins bowed slightly. "Lady Beatrice," he said, "it has been some time." She recovered herself with effort. "Reverend," she said, "I did not expect to meet you here." "I did not expect to be," he replied, "but His Grace requested my presence, and I owe Miss Harrow at the very least my honesty." "Honesty?" she repeated, her voice sharpening. "Lady Beatrice," Edward said, "Reverend Collins, please tell her what you told me." Collins sighed. "My lady," he said gently, "I remember that evening at Ashford Hall. I remember Miss Harrow's distress and your mother's determination to protect your brother. I remember that the young man had a reputation for pursuing servants. I believed then, and I believe now, that Miss Harrow told the truth, that she resisted unwanted advances and was punished for it." "That is not how it was," Beatrice said quickly. "You misremember. We had to think of our position. The appearance was damning." "Appearances are not always reality," Collins said, "and position does not excuse injustice." Beatrice's hands trembled. "You would accuse my brother?" she demanded. "He is not here to defend himself." "I accuse no one," Collins said. "I state what I observed, and I say that Miss Harrow was treated unfairly. The stain on her name should have been on your brother's instead." Edward watched Beatrice closely. "Knowing this," he said, "would you still threaten to spread the old story, to preserve your own comfort at the expense of hers?" Her eyes flashed. "You would take the word of a governess over that of a gentleman?" she asked. "I would take the word of an honest person over that of anyone else," he replied. "In this case, Miss Harrow and Reverend Collins agree. Your brother's behavior in other matters supports their account. Your own silence at the time speaks loudly now." She drew herself up. "If you persist in this course," she said, "you will lose more than my good opinion." "I regret that," he said, "but I will survive the loss." "Society will judge you," she warned. "It already does," he said. "Let it. I am tired of living by its whims. I would rather be condemned for an act of mercy than applauded for indifference." She stared at him, breathing fast. "And what do you plan to do?" she asked. Make her your mistress? Parade her before your peers? He felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I do not make mistresses of women I respect, he said. Nor do I hide those I care for in shadows. If I choose to bring Mrs. Harrow into my life in any lasting way, it will be openly and with honor. Beatrice paled further. You cannot mean... I mean exactly what you think I mean, he said, and your attempts to frighten her away only make me more certain that I must stand beside her. Collins cleared his throat gently. Lady Beatrice, he said, you have an opportunity here as well. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose not to add to the harm. You can choose silence or even correction instead of renewed accusation. Beatrice looked from the Reverend to the Duke, something like panic flickering in her eyes. For a moment, Edward thought she might break. Then her expression hardened. Very well, she said coldly. Keep your charity project if you wish, but do not look to me for approval. I will say nothing as you ask, but I will not sit in the same room as her or her child. I will not be part of this experiment. Then we shall spare each other's company, Edward said. Farewell, Beatrice. She hesitated as if waiting for him to soften, to apologize. When he did not, she turned on her heel and left the room, her skirts snapping behind her. The door closed. Collins exhaled. That went as well as might be expected, he said mildly. Better, Edward said. She will not help us, but she will not actively attack us now. That is something. Collins nodded. If you need me to speak in Miss Harrow's defense again, you have only to send word, he said. I am grateful, Edward replied. I suspect we will need all the honest voices we can find. Later that day, Edward went up to the blue room. Alice sat by the window with a piece of mending in her lap, though her eyes were on the garden below, where Lily stood wrapped in a shawl, holding Mrs. Turner's hand and inspecting the winter bare rose bushes with grave interest. She insisted on a turn in the air, Alice said as he entered. The doctor approved for a few minutes. He said it would do her good. And you? Edward asked. Has it done you good? I find I still do not quite believe this is real, she said. Each morning, I expect to wake and find myself back in Bishop's Lane with the roof leaking. Sometimes reality requires persistence to be trusted, he said. She smiled faintly. You speak like a philosopher. I have had cause to think more than usual, he said. She set the mending aside. Has something happened? She asked. You look resolved. I have been to see Reverend Collins, he said, and I have spoken with Lady Beatrice. She went very still. You should not have, she whispered. She will be furious. She is, he said, but her anger is no longer my concern. He told her simply and clearly what Collins had said, how he had believed her, how he had tried in his limited way to help, how he now stood ready to speak for her. He watched as her face shifted from disbelief to a strange, aching relief. He believed me, she said softly. All this time I thought no one did. He did, Edward said, and so do I. And Lady Beatrice? Alice asked, her voice tightening. I confronted her, he said. With Collins's account, she remains unwilling to admit her brother's guilt, but she has agreed to keep silent. She will not revive the old story, at least not openly. Alice's shoulders slumped. Then it is over, she murmured. Not entirely, he said. People talk. They will always talk. But now, if they repeat the old tale, we can answer it. With facts, with witnesses. She shook her head slightly. You have done so much, she said, more than anyone ever has. I do not know how to repay you. You are not a debt to be repaid, he said quietly. You are... He stopped, the word on his tongue heavier than he had anticipated. I am what? She asked. Important to me, he said simply. Silence fell between them, soft but charged. He moved to the window, looking down at Lily in the garden. She is stronger each day, he said. I believe she will make a full recovery. Yes, Alice said, her voice warming. Thanks to you. Thanks to your stubbornness, he countered. You did not leave her side. Where else could I be? She asked. He turned back. Alice, there is something I must say. Something I have thought about since that first night at the window. She looked wary. You need not say anything more, she said quickly. You have already done enough. More than enough. We should not ask for... I am not speaking of charity, he interrupted. Not of coal or food or doctors. I am speaking of you, and of me." Her cheeks colored. "You must not," she whispered. "Whatever you wish to say, it will only make things harder." "Perhaps," he said. "But some things are hard whether spoken or not. I would rather they be honest as well." He took a breath. "When I saw you that night," he said, "standing in the snow with Lily, I was moved. At first, I thought it was only pity. Then I realized it was something else. You reminded me of someone I failed once, someone I could not help. I told myself I was making amends for that old failure. But that was only the beginning." She watched him silently, eyes wide. "The more I saw of you," he went on, "the more I understood that you are not a symbol, not a cause, but a person. Brave, proud despite everything, gentle with your child, even when you are exhausted yourself, willing to sacrifice your own comfort for the sake of my reputation." "That was not my right," she said faintly. "It was your instinct," he said, "to protect, even those who do not need your protection. That is who you are." He moved closer, leaving a careful distance between them, not trusting himself to stand closer. "I find," he said slowly, "that I cannot imagine returning to the life I led before I knew you. The idea of those dinners, those empty conversations, without the knowledge that you and Lily are somewhere in the world I can reach, it is intolerable." She swallowed hard. "Edward," he lifted a hand, not quite touching her. "Let me finish," he said. "I know what the world will say. I know what you fear. Lady Beatrice has already voiced the worst of it, but I also know this. I will not be content to remain a distant benefactor. I do not want to visit you as one might visit a charity case. I want to share my days with you, my house, my burdens, whatever comes." Her breath came a little faster. "I am asking," he said, his voice soft but clear, "if you will be my wife." The room seemed to grow very still, as if the house itself were listening. Alice stared at him. "Your wife," she echoed. "Yes," he said, "not hidden, not kept in some small house in the country out of sight. Beside me, as Duchess of Ravensfield, if you can bear it." Tears filled her eyes, bright and sudden. "Do not say such things unless you are certain," she whispered. "This is not a kindness. It is a promise that would change everything." "I am certain," he said. "I have never been more so." She shook her head, a small, disbelieving movement. "You could have any lady," she said. "Any well-born woman with a spotless reputation and a fortune. Why choose me, a seamstress with a marred name and a child?" "Because I do not love them," he said simply. "I love you." Her hand flew to her mouth. A small sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. "You cannot." "I can," he said, "and I do. I love your courage, your stubbornness, your laughter, rare as it is. I love the way you watch Lily, as if she is the whole world. I love that you refused my help when you thought it would harm me, even though you needed it desperately. These are the things that matter to me, not the cut of your gown or the length of your family tree." She turned away, shoulders shaking. "You do not know what you ask," she whispered. "To make me your duchess is to invite the world to judge you, to judge Lily." "They will judge me whatever I do," he said. "At least this way, I stand for something I can respect." "And Lily?" she asked. "She will grow up under their scrutiny. She will hear whispers about her mother's past. Then we will drown the whispers in truth," he said. "She will know that her mother was wronged, not wrong, that her mother stood tall in the face of injustice, that her mother was loved and chosen, not tolerated." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "It sounds like a story," she said. "One of the stories I used to read to her. Poor girls do not marry dukes in real life." "Sometimes they do," he said. "If both are stubborn enough." She laughed through her tears, a soft, incredulous sound. He reached out then, very slowly, giving her time to draw back. When she did not, he took her hand in both of his. "I do not ask for an answer this moment," he said. "You have been through too much. Lily is only just recovering. Think on it. Pray on it, if you are inclined. But know that my mind will not change. Whether you give me hope or refuse me, I will continue to see you as I do now, with respect, with affection, with gratitude for what you have brought into my life." Her fingers curled around his almost of their own accord. "I have nothing to bring you," she whispered. "No dowry, No connections. Only myself and Lily. Those are the only dowries I desire, he said. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were clear despite the tears. I have thought of little else since the day you walked out into the snow, she said. I tried to send you away. I told myself it was for your good, for hers. But when you stepped through that door, the world became colder than any winter I have known. He felt his throat tighten. If I say yes, she went on softly, I do not know what storms will come. I only know that I would rather face them at your side than stand alone in my small room, wondering what might have been. He dared to breathe. Then your answer is, yes, she said, the word trembling but strong. Yes, Edward. I will marry you if you are still certain when the sun rises tomorrow. I will be, he said, and the day after, and all the days after that. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips lightly to her knuckles, nothing more. The gesture was simple, almost old-fashioned, but it carried more weight than any embrace. A sound from the window made them both turn. Lily and Mrs. Turner were returning from the garden. Lily's face was flushed with cold, but bright with health. She looked up and saw them through the glass, her small hand waving enthusiastically. Look, Mama, she called when she entered a moment later. I saw the whole garden. The roses are sleeping, but Mrs. Turner says they will wake in the spring. Alice smiled, tears still shining. Yes, she said. They will wake. Edward met Lily's eyes. How would you feel, he asked casually, if you and your mama stayed here a little longer? If this house became your house too? Lily's mouth fell open. Forever? She breathed. If you like, he said. She looked between them, sensing more than she understood. Then her face broke into a grin that chased away the last shadows of her illness. I would like that very much, she said. Very much indeed. Spring came late to London that year, but when it came, it arrived all at once. One morning, Alice woke to find sunlight on the curtains of the blue room and the sound of carts rattling cheerfully along the street. The air felt softer, not warm exactly, but gentle after months of sharp cold. She lay still for a moment. Lily slept beside her, breathing evenly, her cheeks no longer flushed with fever. The house was quiet, except for a faint clink of crockery somewhere below and the distant creak of floorboards. It struck Alice suddenly that this might be the last morning she woke in this bed as Alice Harrow. Soon, she thought, I will wake as someone else. Duchess of Ravensfield. The words did not yet feel real. They hovered at the edges of her mind like a story Lily might ask for at bedtime. The door opened a crack. Lily sat up at once. Is it today? She whispered. Mrs. Turner's head appeared. Her round face was glowing. It is today, she said. Up with you, both of you. There is much to be done. Lily squealed and threw back the covers. Mamma, we are getting married. Alice laughed despite the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. I believe it is I who am getting married, she said. You, miss, are to behave like a solemn young lady and not trip over your own feet in the chapel. I shall float, Lily declared, scrambling out of bed. Like the heroines in the stories, they never trip. They just never mention it, Alice said, swinging her legs to the floor. Mrs. Turner stepped into the room fully, carrying a carefully covered bundle. Your gown, ma'am, she said, her voice unusually soft. His Grace sent word he hoped you might let us add a few touches. Alice's hands stilled. My gown is plain, she said. I'm not sure how many touches it can bear. Mrs. Turner smiled. Plain, yes, but the best muslin. And no one ever looked less plain in white than you will, if you permit me to say so. Alice's cheeks warmed. You may, she said, though I am quite certain you exaggerate. Lily danced from one foot to the other. May I see it? She begged. Just a little? Mrs. Turner indulged her and unfolded the gown. It was simple, as Alice had insisted. No heavy lace, no stiff corsetry, only a clean line of soft fabric that would move when she walked. But Mrs. Turner and the maids had worked delicate embroidery along the hem and sleeves, tiny flowers, almost invisible from a distance, like secrets. It is lovely, Alice whispered. You have all been too kind. You are the one being kind, Mrs. Turner said briskly. You are marrying our Duke. We are the ones who will benefit from that. Mark my words. Alice looked up quickly. Do you truly think so? Many will disapprove. Many always disapprove, Mrs. Turner said. of everything. Let them. The rest of us have eyes. We know when a man has gone from walking through his own house like a ghost to actually living in it. Lily tugged on Alice's sleeve. Mama? Yes? Do you think they will let me stand very near you in the chapel? Lily asked. I do not wish to be far away. You may stand as close as the vicar allows, Alice said, though you must remember to walk slowly. Lily nodded solemnly. I shall walk like a queen, she said, even if I'm only a duke's. What shall I be? A duke's daughter, Mrs. Turner said kindly. That is what you shall be. Lily went still. Truly, she breathed. If his grace has his way, Mrs. Turner said, and I have not yet seen him denied when he is this set on something. Alice swallowed. He has already done so much for us, she said quietly. I do not know how to carry it all. Mrs. Turner gave her a shrewd look. You are not carrying it alone now, she said. That is the point of marriage, I think. There was little time for more words. The morning filled with small tasks, hair to smooth, hands to steady, a light breakfast forced down despite nerves. A maid brushed Alice's dark hair until it shone and twisted it into a simple knot, leaving a few soft curls at her temples. When she put on the gown at last, it felt like stepping into a story and into the world, both at once. Look, Mama, Lily gasped, clapping her hands. You are like the heroines you are. Alice turned slowly toward the mirror. A woman gazed back at her. Pale, yes, with the faintest shadow of worry in her eyes, but straight-backed, composed. Not a governess dismissed in disgrace, not a seamstress in a cold attic. Herself, and more. Am I? She asked quietly. Yes, Lily said, and that settled it. A knock sounded at the door. Come in, Alice called. The door opened and Edward stepped in, then stopped short. Alice stared. She had seen him in fine clothes before, but today he seemed more himself than ever. His dark coat was perfectly cut, his cravat simple and precise. There was no ostentation about him, but he carried a gravity that made the small room feel like a grand hall. He looked at her as if someone had knocked the breath out of him. I beg your pardon, he said softly. Mrs. Turner told me I might have a moment before you left for the chapel. I did not realize, he broke off, still looking, that I might look different in white. Alice teased gently, trying to ease the sudden intensity. That you might make every candle in this house unnecessary, he said. She laughed, her nerves loosening. Now you are not speaking like a duke, she said. You are speaking like a poet. I have never envied a poet until now, he replied. They can use more words than I seem able to find. Lily ran to him. Do I look proper? She demanded, twirling in her new dress, a pale blue frock with a white sash. He took a step back to inspect her solemnly. You look like the most important person in this arrangement, he said. I thought Mama was, she said, puzzled. She is, he said. You are the second most important. I am far down the list. Lily decided she approved of this order. Are you ready? He asked Alice. She took a breath. As ready as I shall ever be. He came closer, stopping at a respectful distance. There is something I want you to hear before we go, he said, in case the day carries us along too quickly. She nodded, her fingers curling around the edge of the dressing table. Whatever happens after this, he said, whatever is said, whatever goes wrong or right, I want you to remember that, for me, this is not an act of rescue. It is not charity. It is not defiance. It is joy, that is all. Her eyes shone. Then we are alike, she said, because for me it is not security or escape. It is choosing you, not your title. You. He lowered his head briefly, as if steadying himself. I do not deserve you, he murmured. Then we are doubly matched, she replied, because I am certain I do not deserve you either. We shall have to simply be grateful and live as well as we can. His laugh was quiet, almost shaky. Agreed. The chapel stood just beyond the garden, small and old, with ivy climbing its stone walls. Inside, clusters of people sat scattered along the pews, not a crowd, but not empty either. Mrs. Turner, the steward, a few of the household staff dressed in their best, the landlady from Bishop's Lane wiping her eyes with the corner of her shawl, Reverend Collins standing near the altar, reading through his notes. A handful of Edward's relatives were present too, a cousin with kind eyes, an uncle who looked disapproving but had come nonetheless. There were also one or two members of society who had quietly chosen to side with compassion rather than gossip. Lady Beatrice was not among them. Alice waited with Lily just outside the chapel door. The music inside began, simple and bright. A familiar hymn played on the small organ. "Are you ready, Mama?" Lily whispered, slipping her hand into Alice's. "I hope so," Alice said. "If I trip, you must pull me upright." "I shall catch you," Lily promised. The door opened. All heads turned. Alice stepped forward, Lily at her side. The aisle seemed longer than any she had walked. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, but she also felt Lily's hand and heard a small gasp from the front row. "Is that her?" someone whispered. "That is her," Mrs. Turner whispered back, pride in her voice. Edward stood at the front, waiting. When he saw Alice, his posture straightened and his expression softened in a way that made the other faces blur. Reverend Collins watched them both, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. Alice walked one step at a time, focusing on Edward, on the way his mouth quirked in encouragement, on the warmth in his gaze that had nothing to do with status and everything to do with something simpler. When she reached him, she let go of Lily's hand. Lily moved to stand just behind her, as if guarding her back. Reverend Collins cleared his throat and began. "We are gathered here," he said, "to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. They come to us from different paths. Some here have known him all his life, some have known her story only in fragments, but today they choose to write a new chapter together, one that belongs to them alone." His words were short and plain, but they felt like a blessing. He turned to Edward. "Edward Blackwell, will you take Alice Harrow to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live?" "I will," Edward said. His voice did not tremble. He turned to Alice. "Alice Harrow, will you take Edward Blackwell to be your husband? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and keep him in sickness and in health, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live?" She looked into Edward's eyes and saw not a duke, but a man who had stepped into an alley to lift her from the snow. "I will," she said. The word rang clear. "Do you have vows of your own to speak?" Reverend Collins asked. Edward nodded. "Very simple ones," he said. He took Alice's hands, careful and sure. "Alice," he said, "I cannot promise that our life will be easy. There will be those who talk, those who sneer, those who will never understand what we have chosen. But I promise you this, you will never face them alone. I will stand at your side, and if the world closes a door to you, I will open another. You will never again stand outside in the cold while I sit in warmth. If I am inside, you are with me. That is my vow." Her throat tightened. She took a breath. "Edward," she said, "I cannot promise that I will always know how to move in your world. I will make mistakes. I will say the wrong things. I will forget which fork to use and when to speak and when to be silent. But I promise you this, I will be honest. I will tell you when I am afraid. I will listen when you are troubled. I will be your equal in loyalty, in effort, in care. You lifted me from the snow. I will do all I can to lift you whenever the world weighs heavy." Lily sniffed loudly behind her, then pretended she had not. Reverend Collins smiled. "The rings," he said. Edward's cousin stepped forward, offering a small velvet box. Edward took one ring and slipped it onto Alice's finger. "With this ring," he said, "I bind my life to yours. Not as a chain, but as a promise." Her fingers trembled as she took the second ring. She slid it onto his hand. "With this ring," she said, "I accept that promise and give you mine in return." Reverend Collins raised his hand slightly. "Then by the power granted to me," he said, his voice warm, "and with great pleasure, I pronounce you husband and wife. What has been joined here today is not to be taken lightly, nor spoken of lightly. It is to be lived daily in small acts of kindness." He paused, eyes twinkling. "You may kiss your bride, Your Grace." Edward turned to Alice. For a moment they simply looked at each other, both laughing a little, both on the edge of tears. "May I?" he asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. "Please," she whispered. He touched his lips to hers, lightly at first, a brief, respectful kiss that deepened just a little as she responded. It was not dramatic, not staged for effect. It was simply theirs, tender and full of all the words they could not fit into vows. A small cheer broke out in the pews. Mrs. Turner dabbed at her eyes openly. The landlady from Bishop's Lane let out a delighted, "Well now," that made several of the servants grin. Lily threw both arms in the air. "They did it!" she cried, then blushed as everyone laughed. When they left the chapel, sunlight fell on the steps, catching the brightness in Alice's eyes. "Where are we going now?" Lily asked, practically skipping between them as they walked to the carriage. Edward exchanged a look with Alice. "I have a notion," he said, "a small correction to make." It was not to a country estate that the carriage rolled next, but back into the heart of London, to the very restaurant where everything had begun. Alice stared as the familiar facade came into view. "Edward," she said slowly, "what are you doing?" "Making amends," he said, "for myself, for them, for the world, if it is paying attention." "The world rarely is," she said. "Then we shall do it for ourselves," he replied. The carriage stopped. The door opened. The same tall windows gleamed, the glass polished. Inside, tables were laid for a private meal. A small sign at the entrance read, "Closed for private celebration." Elkins himself stood at the door, hands folded, expression nervous and eager. "Your Grace," he said, bowing deeply. "Your Grace." "Mrs. Blackwell." "Welcome." Alice faltered on the threshold. "Mrs. Blackwell," she repeated under her breath, tasting the name. Edward offered his arm. "Shall we?" he asked. She took it. Lily trotted beside them. As they entered, a hush fell among the staff. Graham was there too, his posture very straight, his face carefully composed. "Congratulations, Your Grace," he said. "And to you, ma'am." "Thank you," Alice said softly. Edward looked around. "The room looks well," he said. "You have done it justice." "We hope to do justice to your guests as well," Elkins said quickly. "We are honored that you chose to celebrate here." "I chose it because some stories should be finished where they began," Edward said. He raised his voice slightly, addressing the assembled staff. "The last time Mrs. Blackwell and her daughter were here," he said, "they were made to feel unwelcome. That was not acceptable then, and it is not acceptable now. Today we correct that. Today they are not merely my guests. They are the reason we are here at all." Graham stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Mrs. Blackwell," he said, meeting Alice's eyes directly for the first time, "I owe you an apology. I treated you and your daughter with disrespect on that night. I sent you out into the snow when I should have opened the door wider. I am sorry." Alice looked at him, surprised. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I accept your apology." Lily tugged on her sleeve. "May we eat now?" she whispered. "I am thinking about the roast." Edward laughed. "Yes," he said. "Let us eat." The meal that followed was not as grand as some feasts the restaurant had seen, but it was lively. The table at the center was for Edward, Alice, and Lily. Around them sat the people who had woven themselves into their story. Reverend Collins, Mrs. Turner, the steward, the landlady, Edward's cousin and uncle, a few friends who had come despite raised eyebrows elsewhere. Dishes came and went, carried by attentive waiters who treated Alice and Lily with the same courtesy they showed Edward. At one point, Lily set down her fork and looked around, her eyes sparkling. "Mama," she whispered, "do you remember when we stood out there?" She pointed toward the window. "I could only see the food. Now I can hardly see the glass." Alice's chest swelled. "I remember," she said. "I remember how cold it was." "And now?" Edward asked. "Now it is warm," she said simply, in more ways than one. Later, when the plates had been cleared and coffee poured, Edward rose. "If I may have your attention for a moment," he said. The room fell quiet. "I will not make a speech," he began. "Yes, you will," his cousin muttered, loud enough to make a few people chuckle. Edward smiled. "Very well," he said. "I will make a small one." He looked at Alice, then at the window where he had first seen her. "Many of you know how this began," he said. "I was inside. Alice and Lily were outside. There was glass between us. There were rules between us. There were assumptions and fears and habits between us." He paused. "That night I saw something I had been refusing to see for a long time," he continued. "That we build walls around our comfort and call them necessary. That we draw lines and pretend they are natural. That we use words like that sort of people to excuse ourselves from kindness." Graham lowered his eyes. Elkins shifted. I am as guilty of that as anyone, Edward said. For years I let the world tell me who was worthy of my attention. Then a child looked through a pane of glass, and everything I thought I knew about my own life shifted a little. He glanced at Lily. She sat very straight, listening intently. Alice did not ask to enter my world, he said. She did not beg. She did not push. She stood where life had placed her and tried to shield her daughter from the cold. I lacked the courage to see such things before. On that night, at last, I did. And once I saw, I could not unsee. He turned back to Alice. His voice softened. Today I am not proud because I invited them in, he said. That was the least I could do. Today I am proud because she has invited me into her life, because she has agreed to trust me after a world of broken promises. That is the true honor. Alice blinked rapidly, fighting tears. I hope, he finished, that those of us who are here will remember this, that nobility is not measured by birth or by the gleam of crystal on a table, but by how readily we make room at that table for those who need it most. If our marriage stands for anything beyond our own happiness, let it stand for that. He sat down. The room exhaled as one. There was a gentle, heartfelt applause, not the forced kind reserved for speeches made out of duty. Later still, when the guests had gone and the restaurant stood quiet again, Edward, Alice and Lily lingered by the window. Outside the air was cool, but not bitter. The snow was gone, replaced by damp cobblestones and the first hesitant shoots in the cracks of the pavement. Look, Lily said, pressing her hand against the glass. Now I am the one looking out. And what do you see? Edward asked. She squinted. People, she said. Some hurrying, some talking, some looking tired. Any little girls in thin coats? He asked. She shook her head. No, only one once, and she is not cold anymore. Alice slipped her hand into his. Thank you, she said softly. For what? He asked. For opening that door, she replied. For not turning away, for every step after. He looked at her, his fingers closing around hers. You give me too much credit, he said. I do not, she answered. You could have looked away. Many do. You did not. That choice changed everything. It changed everything for me as well, he said. More than you know. They left the restaurant together for the last time, not as strangers divided by glass, but as a family. In the days and months that followed, life was not a perfect storybook. There were awkward introductions and stiff visits. Some of Edward's peers maintained a chilly politeness. A few turned away for good, but other doors opened. A merchant's wife, who had once been a governess herself, called on Alice and offered friendship. A schoolmistress asked if Lily might join her class on special terms. A printer, moved by the tale, approached Reverend Collins and asked if he might print a small pamphlet on justice for servants. Small things, quiet things, but they rippled outward. One evening, months later, Alice sat by the window of Ravensfield House, a book open in her lap. Lily curled against her, listening. Nan, the girl who had once stood in the snow, Alice read, found that the world was not kind, but that kindness existed in it, like a fire that refused to go out. Is that a real story? Lily asked drowsily. Yes, Alice said. It is very real. Does it end happily? Lily murmured. Alice looked across the room, where Edward sat at his desk, reading a letter, his brow furrowed in concentration. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up and smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. Yes, she said, her voice sure. It ends happily, though if I am honest, I do not think it ends at all. It just keeps going. That is the best kind of story, Lily yawned. I like our story, she said. Even the sad parts. Because they brought us here. Alice kissed the top of her head. So do I, she whispered. Outside, the city moved as it always had, full of people drawing lines and crossing them, of doors opening and closing. Inside, in a house that had once felt too large for one man, 3 lives wound together, no longer separated by glass or by fear or by the cruel softness of the words, that sort of people. They were simply together, and for them, that was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.